Welcome to Sara Gonzales Unfiltered this beautiful Monday. We've got so much to get into, including the South Carolina primary spanking and Ronna McDaniel stepping down and the glorious, epic interview of Libs of TikTok with Taylor Lorenz. But first, remember when Donald Trump got beat up in the news for daring say the fake news mainstream media was the enemy of the people? They just, oh my God, they couldn't believe that he would say that. How can this man say that about an entire industry? That is an attack on the First Amendment. Well, first of all, he didn't say the media is the enemy of the people. Of course, he said it about the partisan hacks, and we all know exactly who they are. And second, it really seems every day he was proven right about that over and over and over again. The Associated Press, just over the weekend, published several stories about 22-year-old University of Georgia nursing student Laken Riley, who was killed on campus while going for a morning jog. And this was just a really horrible, tragic story. This young girl, she had so much going for her. She's bright, she's beautiful, she's got this career ahead of her once she finishes nursing school, and her life was just completely cut short by a monster. Now, I want to give you the details of this story by reading directly from the AP article, okay? A 26-year-old man was arrested Friday in the killing of a nursing student whose body was found on the University of Georgia campus. And police said he apparently did not know the victim. He acted alone, and there was no further threat to the university community. The suspect, identified as Athens resident Jose Antonio Ibarra, was taken into custody for the death of 22-year-old Laken Hope Riley, police said. The body of Augusta University College of Nursing student was found near the running trails Thursday, launching a highly visible police investigation that centered on an apartment complex just south of there. Well, there's a little tidbit that you didn't hear in this AP story right here, and that is that this Athens resident, Jose Ibarra, is in fact an illegal immigrant here from Venezuela. Just a minor detail. I'm sure that it was just, an oversight, okay? Just a little oopsie. Surely they wrote a follow-up that highlighted the glaring omission that this man should not have even been in this country in the first place. You have to imagine, surely it's incompetence rather than a deliberate act of deception. This is, after all, the Associated Press. They've been around since like the 1800s. Established, well-reputable Associated Press, the AP. Well, you tell me if their motives were pure. They did write a follow-up on this story. It was titled, "The Killing of a Nursing Student Out for a Run Highlights the Fears of Solo Female Athletes." And in this article, it discussed the dangers female runners face, perceived and real, and the hypervigilance women must take going out even for a run on campus. So that's the root cause of the problem. Toxic masculinity, right? Men who just can't control themselves. That's what's to blame here. Nothing else to see. In fact, the author of that disgusting piece of garbage, Janie Har, even used another anecdotal example in her writing to prove the horrific nature of toxic masculinity, these men who just can't control their urges. And she brought up the 2018 murder of University of Iowa student Molly Tibbetts to further prove her point. There's just one problem. Molly Tibbetts, who was found dismembered in a cornfield. It was just this horrible, gruesome sight. Well, she was also murdered by an illegal immigrant. So 2 examples this author gives to try to prove the point that is toxic masculinity, except both examples that she tries to use to prove her point, both women were murdered by illegal immigrants. But that doesn't fit the narrative. That's not good for optics. It's really not good for optics. And you know what else isn't good for optics? You're going to be shocked to hear this, you guys. The man who just murdered Laken Riley already had a criminal history here in this country. And I do mean after he entered the country illegally, because that is, of course, his first criminal history here in this country. So according to ICE, this monster crossed illegally into El Paso in September 2022 and was released into the United States via parole. I love how they call it parole. They're like, let's super duper pinky promise that you are going to show up to court. And they're like, wink, wink. Yes, I will. Well, let me see, 2032. Yep, I'll show up. So he's released right into the country, September 2022. Nearly a year later, in September 2023, New York police, NYPD, arrested him in New York City for acting in a manner to injure a child less than age 17. But NYPD released him once again right into the interior of the country before an ICE detainer could be issued. Wow. So turns out it's a sanctuary city for everyone but you, the law-abiding American citizen. But you didn't see any of those details in the Associated Press. What a slap in the face to this poor girl and like her grieving family, reducing her senseless death to a mere footnote in the culture wars because you don't want to admit the actual problem, the actual glaring problem that is right in front of you. It's so easy. The problem is so easy. It's so easy to find out. Allowing completely unvetted strangers into the interior of the country, it turns out, is not a great policy. And recall that, as many have pointed out, St. George Floyd overdosed on drugs and received 3 funerals at a time, by the way, when you weren't even allowed to stay with your dying relatives in a hospital. You were not allowed to come visit your relatives in a hospital. You couldn't do that because everyone was on lockdown. But George Floyd got 3 funerals, a statue, and millions of dollars for his family. Laken Riley was murdered by an illegal. Joe Biden's got nothing to say. There's been very little media coverage and $0 compensation for her family, which I would say it's Joe Biden. The blood is on his hands. He owes her family quite a bit of compensation. But, you know, it's not just the press who does this, perpetuates the lies and the falsehoods to run cover for their agenda because of the optics. It's, of course, the lawmakers themselves. And our very own favorite, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a woman who represents a district in New York, of all places, a place that has seen their state decimated by illegals, actually had the audacity to go on MSNBC, I should say, over the weekend and say that the border crisis is just the false narrative. Watch.
There is not only no moral calculation, there is no economic calculation, there is no logical calculation, there is only a political calculation. And that political calculation is we are going to keep whining about it. Mm-hmm. We are going to keep pretending this is a crisis while contributing to actual problems. And then we're going to block the solution so that we can campaign on it over and over and over. And we can call it caravans, we can call it migrant crises, we can call it family separation, and they will just recycle it over and over and over again in order to gin up, you know, just so much animosity and destruction in this country and racism in this country, because that's the only thing that the Republican Party even is standing on.
I did hear her tell on herself again. There is no moral calculation, no economic calculation, no calculation whatsoever. It is purely a political calculation. Yes, that's you. There is no moral calculation for what you guys are doing to this country, the devastation that you are wreaking upon this country because of your stupid political calculation. The economic, I can guarantee you, there's no economic calculation for the types of, the billions and billions of dollars that we are going to be forced to spend on these people, that we are currently spending on these people with absolutely no way out. And by the way, she went on in that interview to talk about, well, the Republicans reject all of these solutions like a path to citizenship and work papers and partnerships with businesses who need employees. No, just no. No path to citizenship, no work papers, no compromise. And I just want you, if you will, juxtapose what you just heard from radical left darling AOC, not addressing the problem at all, trying to tell you, look, the problem is you, because there's no problem at all, according to anyone else. Okay, your lying eyes deceive you. There's no problem. It's just a false narrative that the Republicans are ginning up to create, some sort of a anger within their base. It's just, and look, all of those people flooding through the borders. Those are just deep fake videos, I guess. That isn't actually happening. The Border Patrol fist bumping all of these illegals as they're working their way into the interior of the country. That's Gemini, Google Gemini. That's just AI. Don't worry about that. So juxtapose that type of rhetoric, okay? There's no problem. There's no problem at all. What problem? What are you talking about? What problem? I don't see a problem. To Donald Trump over the weekend at CPAC. Watch.
And they do come from prisons and mental institutions, and they are terrorists. And we're going to be paying a price, and it'll be the largest deportation in the history of our country. And we have no choice. And it's not a nice thing to say, and I hate to say it. And those clowns in the media will say, oh, he's so mean. No, they're killing our people. They're killing our country. They're killing our people. We have no choice.
No compromise. No path to citizenship. No work papers. That's the plan, guys, right? That was the plan. If we allow that to happen, we are falling into their trap. That was the plan. Let these people in, okay? Let them stay here for a few years, and then you're the bad guy for saying, but they've just built this life here. They have a family here now. They have friends here. They have roots here now. And you can't just rip that from them and send them back to this country that they no longer identify with. No, that is absolutely the plan here. No path to citizenship. No. Mass deportation is the only answer. And for all of Donald Trump's flaws, I know, there are some of you who say, well, he talked about deporting people the first time around and he didn't actually deport as many people. Well, first of all, don't hold it against him that there were far less people trying to come into the country because of his rhetoric, because of his tough talk. It turns out that deters people from even bothering to make the dangerous journey. But number two, we're living in a completely different time. I mean, Joe Biden has doubled the amount of illegal immigrants in the country, almost, as compared to what it was before he arrived at the helm of things. So I would argue now's the time that Donald Trump sees that he really has to spring into action. I do not believe that this is just rhetoric. I believe that he understands, because he was so tough on his rhetoric, because he wanted to build the wall, the foundation for already understanding that this is a problem was there already. To see the devastation that the Biden administration has caused in just 3 short years. Donald Trump, and by the way, Stephen Miller has already said, mass deportations begin at noon on Inauguration Day. And I would say, not soon enough. But if I have to wait till Inauguration Day on noon, fine. But I'm not waiting any longer than that. All right. When we come back, I want to bring in the panel to discuss Nikki Haley's whipping over in her home state of South Carolina. We'll be right back. All right, I want to welcome to the show Stu Burguiere, host of Stu Does America, and of course, Pat Gray, host of Pat Gray Unleashed. And look, I'm just going to say this is my favorite part of a Monday is having Pat and Stu on. It's usually not a Monday.
Favorite part of the worst day of the week. We appreciate that. Yeah. We're shooting high.
I meant it nice. I don't know. You chose to take that the wrong way.
I did, as I usually do. Yeah.
So let's talk about the South Carolina primary over the weekend. So I believe that the New York Times called the race before one vote was even counted, and it was like record time. I think it was like 3 minutes. And then everyone was like, all right, well, that's all we need to see here. Donald Trump is the winner, and Nikki Haley has now lost 4 times consecutively if you count Nevada. So I would love your opinions on, at this point, why Nikki Haley would still be in the race. Because if it's me, I'm like, I don't even want to go to South Carolina. I'm going to be embarrassed. Like, I would rather not have that on the record. He's going to beat me by like 30, 40 points. And this is just going to be really embarrassing. So I'm just going to gracefully bow out before that actually happens. And she was like, nope, bring it on. I can't wait to get defeated. And then when I do get defeated, I'm going to turn around and pretend like I somehow won. And that's, interestingly enough, just what we've seen her do. And it's just very bizarre to me.
Yeah, I mean, let me give you the alternate take on this, because you're right. The question is, why would she still stick around is a really good one. However, I will say the alternate is also a pretty good question, which is, why wouldn't you stay around? In the next 8 days, 20 states vote. She's come all of this way. She has to wait 8 more days to get into Super Tuesday and get through a total of 20 states, including Michigan and a couple others.
And just lose more.
She's gonna lose more. But she will pick up some delegates. I mean, she even picked up a few in South Carolina. She picked up a few in New Hampshire. And again, the only play for her at this point is to try to be the alternative in case the Trump thing completely falls apart for whatever reason. God forbid, some sort of health crisis, or more likely some legal scenario where they decide to throw him in a gulag. I don't know what's going to happen in the next. Now, I would even say if that occurred, she still wouldn't get the nomination.
Right.
However, she would have some delegates to argue with and maybe get some concessions, or who knows. I mean, with her at this point, I think she's already burned. I think we'd all agree. She's burned all of her, whatever MAGA sort of street cred she had left from her time serving in the administration. So at this point, another week, no one's going to remember this. She still has enough money to get through a week. Why not see what happens? I think that's the only reason why you go forward at this point, though.
Yeah, I was watching her speech that I mentioned previously. I was watching her speech, and it was just, she was saying, like, the words were encouraging words, but her tone and the look on her face indicated that she didn't even believe the words that were coming out of her own mouth.
Well, you can't. You can't. You can't even believe yourself in that particular instance. I thought it was amazing. Trump won 60-40. The headline in the Drudge Report was 40% of Republicans don't want Donald Trump. Like, it's her home state. He beat her by 20, and it was probably much worse. Democrats crossed the aisle and voted in this to help her out, and still lost by 20 in her home state. It's a bloodbath. I mean, it's ugly and it's embarrassing. And, like Stu says, I guess why not stick around till Super Tuesday? The only downside of that maybe is running out of money. The Koch network cut her off.
Yep.
And so that's not a good sign. And maybe she's getting some ill will in the Republican Party, but there's going to be new leadership. I don't know. I don't know how much it hurts her, but it seems fruitless at this point.
Yeah, just embarrassing. Okay, so Pat, to your point, I want to play, I think we have a clip here of one of the Democrats who turned out to vote for Nikki Haley. Watch.
I voted for Nikki Haley. Simply to, maybe cancel out one of the Donald Trump votes. And that is because this is heavy Donald Trump support in our state. I don't understand it.
You don't understand Donald Trump support in South Carolina. Do you know your state, ma'am? Do you know your state? You see this and you're just like, why do we not have closed primaries in certain states, including here in Texas? So you can't just go cancel out someone's. If you're a Democrat and you're like strategically trying to cancel out someone's vote.
I mean, I don't understand it really. I mean, I get the idea is, of course, when you get to a general election, you want candidates that are appealing to not just Republicans, right? Like, so I get why they did it. Or I would say, especially maybe independents, you might want to let in at times, maybe in certain states. But it doesn't make much sense to let Democrats come across. They're not going to be voting in the best interest of the party. I will say for Nikki Haley, though, I don't think it hurts her really at all. I think any damage that has happened with Nikki Haley has already happened. Her future is not as a MAGA Republican. It's not as a Donald Trump ambassador anymore. That's not going to happen. Her future is probably like the future of Paul Ryan, like serving on the board of some major corporation where she makes a lot of money. And so I don't think staying in this race really hurts her from that point. And I will say, too, I don't think it hurts Donald Trump either. What does he need to do? He go to states that you would go and campaign in anyway, like Michigan. He should be campaigning in Michigan anyway. Yeah, sure, go show up there. Don't show up anywhere else. You're going to win by default. You don't need to run a primary campaign anymore. He knows that. He doesn't need to spend any money on that. Just spend money on dual purpose type campaigning, and he should be fine. I think you can look at this and say, the Drudge headline is an interesting one because it's like, if Donald Trump were if Joe Biden won a primary 60-40 against, some candidate, we'd all be like, wait a minute, this is crazy. This is really bad for Joe Biden. But Trump isn't really a pure incumbent, right? Like, he kind of is an incumbent. Like, if it was just an open primary, if you go back to 2016, a 60-40 win in South Carolina would be amazing. Mm-hmm. And Trump is kind of in the middle there. I mean, there is some opposition to Trump in this party, but like, it's his party, right? Like Ronna McDaniel, who is, by the way, also a Trump choice, stepping down, and Laura Trump being named to one of the top couple of positions there shows whose party this is. It's his. It's his for as long as he's around. If I don't know, even if he loses in 2024, I wouldn't be surprised to see him on the ballot in 2028. Like, it's just his until he's gone, I think. Yeah, and I mean, to your point, I think. Regardless of Nikki Haley's actions right now, she's still, like, I just went and early voted. I had all options available to me. It's not like because she says I suspend my campaign that they like remove her from the ballot. People would still have the opportunity to vote for her regardless at this point. So it really, to your point, doesn't really affect Donald Trump in that way. He's going to win either way. Yeah. I don't think it drains his resources. Yeah. I think we sometimes just make too much out of like whether she's in or she's not. Who cares, right? Like, she's not going to win. Yeah. I think for her particular purposes, if she could get to somehow winning 5 states, that's a big. I think this, if I remember the rules correctly for the RNC, I think it's 5 states she has to win to actually be on the ballot at the convention. There might be some value. Like, if she could win Hawaii, Delaware, I don't know, win 5 states somehow, there might be some value to her because then she could at least make an argument at the convention. But winning 0 states, she's not going to. You can't. Not win anything. I don't see any states. Like, I would say the 2 she was maybe best positioned to win were New Hampshire and South Carolina, and she lost by 11 and 20. Mm-hmm. Now, look, I was actually surprised to see her at 40%. I thought that number was higher than I thought. I thought she would be like maybe mid-30s, maybe low 30s. I thought it maybe could even be a 70-30 type election. Mm-hmm. 60-40 is still a blowout, though. If it's still it's still a one-on-one contest. And how many times have we heard? And I've even looked at back in 2016. I know I said it. It would be really interesting to see Trump against one candidate and to see what would happen. Well, we've seen it in 2024, and what happens is he wins by a lot.
Yeah. You know what? She's just irritating me at this point.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
I just don't want to look at her anymore. I don't want to hear from her, and I don't want to look at her. Just go home. Just go home, please.
I totally agree, Pat.
I'm just irritated. Go away.
Speaking of going home, Stu, you mentioned Ronna McDaniel stepping down as the RNC chairwoman. And Laura Trump is, of course, being floated as one of the people. What are your thoughts, Pat, on Laura Trump taking over that position, if that is what happens?
Well, like Stu said, it's kind of Donald Trump's party at this point. So that doesn't surprise me. And the Trump family is pretty much in charge. Could have gone to any of his kids, I'm sure, or any of his daughters or sons-in-law, and it would have been the same situation. He's in total control now, and I don't think it'll change much.
Well, I just can't imagine. I mean, I like Laura, but I can't imagine the RNC being anything that anyone should ever consider donating money to ever again. Like,
but other than not that
I ever would advocate or have advocated for anyone to donate to the RNC, but I mean, to see how that money was being spent. Hopefully she can reform it, but it's almost like is it beyond repair at this point, just from the bad reputation that I think it should have, at least if the people who are paying attention should feel like it stinks to high heaven and not want to have anything to do with it. But I don't know.
I mean, look, I think when Trump is head of the party, he's going to be able to make decisions based on who he wants. As we said, Ronna McDaniel was his choice at one point. She ran her course. He doesn't want to have her anymore. He's going to pick somebody else. I mean, I'm curious if either of you guys worry about this at all, and I'm just throwing this out here very delicately. We did do a lot of complaining about a Bush legacy, where like it seemed like every child seemed to have prominent jobs for some reason. We also complained about the Clintons doing this, and like, well, this is kind of what's going on here. It does seem like we're going down this road, and there's nobody who cares about his name more than Donald Trump. It's on every building, we know. Trump should have people who are executing his vision for the party because, he's the head of the party. And I don't think there's anybody who would say that that's unfair. He's the guy, the top of the ticket. It should reflect his vision. But I don't know, naming 900 of your kids to every position, that's how he's run his business and it's worked well. But I don't know if I'm excited about that per se.
I would agree that the nepotism, I think, is a problem. And it is kind of a conflict of interest to be assigning your kids to those positions of power. But then, Jared Kushner did a great job at his role when he was in the administration. So it's like, well, where do you draw the distinction between, okay, but this guy earned his keep, and okay, well, just because he's associated with Donald Trump, he's not allowed to have anything to do with it.
Also, the old rules don't apply to Donald Trump. Maybe you've noticed that.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah, none of those rules apply to him.
Yeah.
Any criticism that we had for George W. Bush is not carried over to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
Yeah.
I think too, and you can look at the Trump thing and saying well, he probably feels like he can't trust anybody, right? He has gone through a lot of people.
That's basically
Who could
what he said.
blame him though? Who could blame him?
That's what I mean. So maybe I don't know, somebody in my family will do it. At least I can trust them.
Yeah.
I can understand the instinct, but we should we should think about this a little bit before we jump full, both feet into the pool where we're just naming everyone with the last name Trump to every job.
I agree.
It can be concerning, and because I do think you look at some of these polls, who do you want the next presidential candidate to be if it's not Donald Trump? And a lot of them say Donald Trump Jr. It feels like we're just and I don't know, maybe he's the best guy. I don't know, but it does feel like we're going down a road that we should at least be internally observing and making sure that we want this is the road we're choosing. It doesn't just happen to us.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and we got to take a quick break. We'll be back with more. First, we want to thank our sponsor, Coppercraft Distillery. So I'm just going to be honest with you. They write me these flowery language things to say, but I just really, I like alcohol. And when you like alcohol as much as I do, you really you become somewhat of a connoisseur, I would say. It's not alcoholic. It's now called connoisseur. Okay.
It feels much better than alcoholic.
It sounds really cool, right? So being a whiskey connoisseur, I actually know that Coppercraft Distillery has this amazing award-winning black label straight bourbon whiskey that they craft in Michigan's manufacturing coast, where they're creating all of this stuff. But it's really, really, really delicious. And they've got all sorts of different liquors. They've got vodka, they've got rum, they've got gin, they've got bourbon. And they've also got these little canned cocktails, which I really want to try, just for an instant mixed drink. If you don't want to play bartender, it's right there. You just pop it open and drink it. So you can buy online and ship to your door at coppercraftdistillery.com. I just take it from the connoisseur. All right, that's all I can tell you. It's small batch, American made. It tastes delicious, super smooth. Try it out at coppercraftdistillery.com. Use promo code Sarah. That is coppercraftdistillery.com, promo code Sarah. So when we're talking about the presidential election, and we're talking about the Republican side, where you have Nikki Haley just lying in wait, waiting to see what happens with Donald Trump. Do they throw him in prison? Does something happen, God forbid, with his health? And then on the other side, you have Gavin Newsom, who I think is doing the exact same thing. I mean, you saw him. How long ago was he already running ads in Florida trying to convince Floridians that California, it turns out, was actually the free state? You guys don't even know about freedom over there in Florida. Come on over to California, where we're going to mask you and your kids until you die, and then we're going to force you to get vaccination. All right, anyway. So Gavin Newsom going out, doubling down on his stance regarding late-term abortion. I want to play him just recently on Meet the Press. Watch.
Well, let me press you, though, Governor. Do you think there is a week that access to abortion should be banned?
I think we've established that firmly in the context of what states are doing, like California, where we establish a constitutional right to access abortion. And at the end of the day, I think that's a determination for women and their doctors. As it relates to the issues in California, we've established that firmly in the state constitution. As it relates to getting into the debate around late-term abortion, that's a complete canard.
Complete canard. How? How so? Because I would say, you notice the MSNBC woman actually pressed him by saying, what week? What week? Which I was shocked to see.
Impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought so. But might I just also add for context, there is literally no reason for a late-term abortion. Any time the left says that, it is just not true. It's always faster if there is an emergency and there is some sort of, something that is a threat to the mother's life or the child's life. It is in all cases faster to do an emergency C-section. And then guess what? As an added bonus, the baby comes out alive and not dead. As it turns, you're still delivering the baby either way. It's just that it comes out alive and not dead, which I feel like is a really, really great thing. And so but it makes you wonder when you have an MSNBC host pressing him on what week, if they're concerned that is no longer an appropriate response to late-term abortion.
Well, first of all, it's only an added bonus if what you want is the baby to be alive.
Well, that's a great point.
So you do, I do, Pat does, but they don't. So it's not an added bonus to them at all, which is a terrible.
Well, it is an added bonus for the baby. I would like to bring up.
I think you're right. Occasionally we should think about the babies.
I feel like we should.
I don't know. It's weird. It's interesting because, look, if you're talking to a conservative on MSNBC, they will hound you until you give the answer. She did follow up and attempt to get the answer. We didn't see anything that happened after. I don't know if he ever actually gave one, but it seemed like that's where it ended. If I saw I watched a good chunk of the clip and I didn't see anything after that I noticed. But anyway, the point is, it's good that people are bringing this up. I think it's getting to that point where it's like it is really morally inconsistent to press everybody on IVF treatments in Alabama with 3 clinics closing down for IVF treatments. Again, like a narrow look. It's a worthwhile debate. It's something that people should talk about. But like it's a narrow part of this conversation. Rape and incest is another one. Look, it's really important to talk about that, but it's such a narrow part of the conversation. Look, most abortions happen before the late term, and that is something that conservatives need to remember. When we're talking about 16-week bans. Look, 95% of abortions happen before the 16th week. So, we could talk about a 16-week ban, but have we been fighting for 50 years to stop 5% of abortions? Is that really what this has been about the whole time? Seems kind of like a lot of effort for a very little gain, though, of course, every baby in life matters. But when you're talking about this late-term abortion issue, it absolutely is something he should be able to say. They can't even bring themselves to say what their policy is. We're guaranteeing access to women throughout their pregnancy. What about the last week? The Constitution guarantees the rights of freedom of women of freedoms. And it's they can't even, it turns into Kamala Harris. They sound like a word salad's coming out of their mouth. Look, own the viewpoint.
Yes.
I know my viewpoints are unpopular on abortion. I know it. I own it. I will tell you about it. I have viewpoints that are way out of the mainstream on it. I don't think they should happen. I want babies to be alive. Call me crazy. Call me wacky. They have viewpoints as well. They are way out of the mainstream, and they won't even admit to them. They won't even say what they believe because they know how terrible it is to kill a child seconds before birth. But that is what they believe.
Yeah.
I love that the late-term abortion is a canard. But back alley abortions, oh my gosh, that's so prevalent.
so prevalent.
Every day, it happens all day, every day. There's almost nobody who actually gives birth anymore outside of a back alley, and they're aborted. We wanted them to give birth, but they couldn't because we had to kill them in a back alley abortion. And I'm somebody whose grandmother died from a back alley abortion with a clothes hanger, and she got infected. And she died from that. And I still don't think that back alley abortions are so prevalent we need to protect them. They made it up back in the 70s before Roe v. Wade. They made up this arbitrary number of 10,000 women every year die from back alley abortions. Completely untrue. Very few women have died from back alley abortions. But the canard is, of course, the late term abortions. That never happens. Never, ever happens. I mean, they have it both ways on every single issue. It's really amazing.
Right. Which, again, to your point, Stu, it's like, okay, well, if it's just a canard and it never happens, then it should be very easy for you to say whether or not you approve of it. Very, very easy.
Yeah.
Saying that it's a canard, it's the same thing whenever they don't pass legislation and they're like, well, we didn't need to do that because, we've already passed this. It's like, well, but then you could still come on the record and say what you believe if it's a thing that either already is taken care of or a thing that never happens, then we can at least be clear in what our rhetoric is surrounding that.
I was listening to, you're so right. And it's like, it's so infuriating how they turn into these like libertarians on this one day of the year where they don't want, healthcare to be implemented by government. I was listening to a podcast this morning and they were talking about this IVF treatment issue. And the woman was interviewing someone. Of course, they went to an IVF clinic that had closed down, or at least had been suspended until they figure out what this law is going on in Alabama. And like it's such a sort of sympathetic interview. And one of the questions was like, how does it feel to have the government managing whether you can give care or not? Thinking to myself, did you ever even think to ask anyone this question during the Obamacare debate? Was there even a moment where it crossed your mind? Or, I don't know, during COVID? Like, was there a moment where you thought, maybe the government should, never in a million years would a reporter ask that question during any of this other stuff where we've been saying over and over again, hey, we really shouldn't have the government making healthcare decisions for us. To them, when it comes to abortion, it's the only time they don't want it. They want all healthcare decisions to be made by the government except this one thing that just happens to kill a child. And it's like, man, that's an insane stance that if anyone bothered to investigate it in the mainstream media, they would see how hypocritical it was.
Which, by the way, I know we're running out of time, but I do want to play, to your point, Stu, I do want to play Joy Reid on TikTok responding to all of this, the comments that Senator Tuberville made on the court decision in Alabama that, of course, embryos created by IVF are, in fact, considered children. And this is just wacky land from Joy Reid. Watch.
The United States has a population of north of 327 million people. Why do we need more kids? I mean,
you know how society works.
Senator Tuberville is the one screaming that 10 million immigrants, which I don't even know that number even makes any sense because it doesn't, have streamed into the country since Joe Biden has been president. And you're claiming that that's too many people, that if more people come into the southern border, this is some sort of crisis because we've got too many people and we've got no more space and we can't afford more people. But now you're saying we need more kids? Can you explain who's the we and what's the purpose?
Very, very easily.
Very easily.
You're also
She's not done.
Senator from the state of Alabama. God help the people there.
Oh, my gosh.
Are you saying the state of Alabama needs more kids? Why does the state of Alabama need more kids? More kids for what?
Sure.
There was a time when the state of Alabama absolutely needed more kids because, Alabama was a slave state.
Oh, she got him.
He's got to re-implement slavery, isn't it?
She got him. That's his dastardly plan, is to re-implement slavery using IVF embryos. She
nailed it.
Nailed it. She nailed him.
She's so smart. She is so
really,
smart.
because I thought you were going to say stupid.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I can't believe that.
Really thought you were.
She makes some interesting decisions. To put that on TikTok, why do we need more children on TikTok is an interesting thing to say. And also to go in public with that hair is an interesting thing to do. It's a fascinating decision. We could spend hours just on that decision. Imagine thinking that was the right thing.
There it is.
Imagine being like, you know what? That's exactly, because first of all, it just looks, so incredibly natural. But it's beautiful. And that's a really smart point as well. A really well-crafted point. Because why do we need more children? This weird, it goes, I shouldn't go on, but this goes back to this, this whole depopulation thing they seem to be into, which is I don't know. We praise the planet and kill all the kids. I don't get the concept.
I feel like society should go on. is kind of why I think we should have more kids. Like, I think like we need a next generation to like stay populated.
Yeah.
And that's that. I mean, I really do.
And maybe every individual deserves a chance at life, including, by the way, the individuals in Mexico that you should just be in Mexico unless they come here legally. Right. That's all. Right. They also deserve a shot at life.
Right.
Even Mexican babies deserve a chance at life. Every single child and every adult deserves a chance to live their life. That doesn't mean they get to break laws constantly when they live it.
All right, let's go ahead and let's take a quick break, and then I want to talk about the libs of TikTok Taylor Lorenz meet, which was just amazing. First, I want to tell you guys about the Fearless Army Roll Call 2.0. So every year, you know, our culture seems to sink deeper and deeper into the quicksand of hopelessness and despair. But Jason Whitlock is organizing an event called Fearless Army Roll Call 2.0. It's brought to you this year by Preborn, and it's an all-day event in Nashville, Tennessee on June 1st. It's going to bring a lot of you men, a lot of you who listen to Jason Whitlock, it's going to bring men together under a united banner of godliness and responsibility. You're going to hear speeches from Jason and several special guests. So come have your heart and mind filled with messages that God wants you to hear and share fellowship with your fellow Christians. You can go to fearlessarmyrollcall.com to reserve your spot today. So the creator of Libs of TikTok, Shia Reichik, met up with Taylor Lorenz of the Washington Post, who, by the way, was the woman responsible for doxing Shia in the first place. And I want to play some of this was an epic video, but I want to play some of this video. Watch.
But there is a context that it would be okay to give kids pictures like that of gay sex. Anal sex in elementary school?
I guess sex pictures in school. I don't know because you know who I would defer to on that.
Who?
Just because neither of us are sex educators, I would defer that question to a qualified professional, a sex educator, and say, hey, you're an expert. You've treated tons. You've educated tons of people. You're a full-time sex educator. You've really studied this. What are the appropriate boundaries? I don't think that myself as a journalist or a media personality, I don't think I'm the right one to make that decision. And I guess I'm wondering why
I have seen sex educators say that they want these books in schools. So then you're okay with it?
I think I would want to talk to the sex educator and rely on whatever the sex educators say. Okay. I'm wondering why you feel like you're qualified to be a sex educator when you have no background in that.
I don't want to be a sex educator. I just don't want to give kids porn in school.
Great idea, Taylor. Great idea. Let's call the sex educator in to determine whether or not my 5-year-old should learn about anal sex. That's great. Yeah, that wouldn't be totally creepy at all to bring someone in who calls themselves a sex educator to determine what is appropriate for someone's children. But of course, Taylor Lorenz admitting that she actually hasn't seen any, she hasn't read, she hasn't bothered to do her due diligence on any of these books that Shia is talking about. She's like, I don't know. I haven't even seen it. Oh, really? Okay, but you found it necessary to try to attempt to ruin this woman's life by doxing her. And now you're like, oh, I don't actually know what's in it. Let's ask the sex educators. Stunning.
Incredible. Well, why do you even live your life? Well, why make any decisions? Why not? Right. Like when you go to see a movie, why do you put your own input in it? Why not just see whatever has the highest critical rating and go see it? Like, why? It doesn't make any sense at all. It's like you're taking yourself out of your life. And of course, that's not at all how she would operate under any other context. If you asked a religious person, well, what do you believe about gay marriage? Well, I'll go to a religious expert and the Pope will tell me he's against it. Well, then what? Do you agree with the expert in that situation? Of course she wouldn't, right? Like she's leaning on these experts because she's trying to get out of what she's saying, which it was amazing because in an earlier part of that interview, you're right, Sarah, she had never even seen these books. Now, look, I don't want to see these books, and I unfortunately have already seen these books because we've talked about it before. But like, if you're a person who's coming in being critical of those wanting to ban the books, don't you familiarize yourself at the slightest bit with what's in them? Right. And then, for her to say like, oh, well, I can't comment on that. It's funny because here she is. She's following the experts on her mask, right? Well, no, actually, no. There's no expert that would tell you wearing an N95 mask in an outdoor setting makes any difference whatsoever. That's not even me being like, oh, I'm Mr. COVID skeptic. That's like the science. That is absolutely the science. Number two, she's trying to avoid, I guess COVID or disease X or something, while she's sitting approximately 4 feet away from passing traffic. The most dangerous thing she's doing in this scenario is sitting at a chair as cars are driving by her. Any one of them could run right over her.
Yeah, but the mask will protect her.
Oh, okay,
if she gets hit by a car, that mask is gonna save her life.
Great point.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So
Thank you, Pat.
comforting. Yeah, and I guess parents have no say in this. We got to wait on what a sex expert says.
A made-up expert, a sex
me?
educator. I don't need a sex educator to tell me that teaching my young child about gay sex is not a correct decision.
Right. It's despicable.
And look, the law, when it comes to porn, the law would prevent you from showing the kids those pictures. You are not allowed to go to a website if you were a child to go see those pictures. But for her, I guess it's okay. And it's like, well, who is the best expert when it comes to your children? Like, it's you. The parents.
Who's the one that cares about them the most?
Right.
I don't know, the parent or a sex expert?
They don't have a political agenda with their kids. I mean, like, you see this with kids all the time. Like, they care about their parents care about their kids. They really do. Like, you see these people who are angry and are screaming at, town councils and, the Sara Gonzaleses of the world. The reason they do that is because they actually give a crap, right?
Yep.
And like that's the person you want arguing on behalf of kids, is the person who cares the most. And like, look, I mean, like, it's just beyond the fact of how wrong she is. It's how she's willing to basically hand over her life. She's handed over all decision-making process in her entire life to people she can't even name. Yeah. That's a bizarre thing.
And look how well that's worked out for her.
Yeah. She's doing great.
Alone. Probably has many cats and is wearing an N95 mask in 2024 outside. So I would say that decision-making process has not worked out great for her. But hey, maybe that's just me. All right, we've got to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Got something to say? Leave Sarah a message at 888-969-5113.
Well, Chelsea Handler, speaking of women who are old and are going to die alone, Chelsea Handler decided to celebrate her 49th birthday like this. Okay, there we go. This is one of those I had to see it, so you do too. Skiing with her dog, I think. That's a dog on her back in her backpack in just,
oh man,
I don't know if that's a swimsuit or underwear, but she is just like, she doesn't understand that this is like very desperate. That at 49 you should be like at home enjoying your family, and she is just skiing naked with her dogs.
Let's not forget, she's the same person who thought the moon and the sun were the same thing.
I forgot that.
Wait.
Oh my gosh, have you not heard that?
No, I think I have. Wait.
Absolutely 100% serious. She thought the moon and the sun were the same thing until like 6 months ago.
Well, that maybe sheds a light on why she's still alone at 49.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah,
All right. Thanks, guys.